There is no question that something is here, lurking, somewhere in the darkened corners. But how will we ever find out what it is? We need to look, always, and never stop. No matter what stands in our way. No matter what others may think. Explore the darkness. Shine light into it. Join the red strings and the silver threads. Everything is connected. Somehow. I am Mark L. Watson. This is Peer Beyond the Veil.
Realistically started in the UFO phenomenon quite accidentally. I was 4 years old when an entity came in my room in Midland, Texas, and my mother, who's 91 years old, said, "I can't believe you remember." I said, "Mom, I've got a great memory." I said, "I know exactly what happened." "Well, why did you never tell us?" I said, "Because of that awful Boo Radley look on your face right now. I didn't want to see it when I was a child." So the contact experience was then, and I had no idea what in the world the entity was, what he was doing in my room. It was wintertime, cold, freezing. I couldn't figure out where's his clothes. I mean, what any 5-year-old kid would want to know is, what are you doing running around out in the freezing weather in the cold?
It's easy for the majority of us, living our lives out in our respective towns, cities, countries. We're safe, generally. There's little threat to our daily existence, nothing to realistically upset our balance, burst our bubble, knock us from the routine which we put in place to help us through life. Threats of terrorism, domestically and internationally, creep in through news broadcasts, trickle into our cars, living rooms and workspaces. Religious groups, fundamentalists, people of other ideologies, these are the people who pose the biggest threat to our Western culture and our general safety here. Wars abroad are removed from our conscience, playing out in far-off lands where the outcome is of little importance to us. We put our trust in our governments, in our military power, our tanks and missiles and nuclear threat, our coalitions with other powers. We trust that, together, they will keep us safe. There should be no harm that can reach us, not with those guys watching our backs. We develop aircraft that can break the sound barrier, missiles that can strike from over 2,000 miles away and wipe out satellites, clandestine, covert, black op technologies that can protect us from anything. But, it seems, there is a threat to each one of us, and our government has no way of preventing it, though they are very much aware of it. We're not at the top of the food chain, as we may have thought. We have been visited here on our little blue sphere more frequently than we could ever know. There is no way to understand the enormity of what we are part of. We are merely the ant in the garden, going about our business while the universe unfolds around us. Ask the ant about the ways of the world, and its perspective will only be that of an ant's. It may see the people walking in and out of its world, affecting it in certain ways, but its existence is its own. We are indeed only the ant, the pawn in the greater chess game, sacrificial, nothing of grand value. More than 40 years ago, Derrel Sims had his first encounter with an entity from beyond our existence, the rook to his pawn. Left eternally changed by the encounter and subsequent encounters, he set about changing his role from that of the pawn, that of the ant. He changed from the hunted to the hunter. He spent 3 decades equipping himself, mentally, intellectually, to set about being the first to discover what our role truly is. With a career as a military police officer, a CIA operative and private investigator, a researcher and international speaker, and eventually a writer and TV personality, it is with huge pleasure that we welcome the alien hunter himself, Derrel Sims, to tell us in his own terrifyingly truthful way exactly what happens when you peer beyond the veil.
Then everything was fine until I got married, and then we had a child when he's 6 years old. I sensed something was wrong. I ran through my house in the middle of the night, past his room, because I knew he wasn't in the room. And it was the same feeling I'd had in my contact before. I knew they had him. And rather shocking for me. And there he is. They just brought him back. He's standing there in a deep trance in the middle of the room. And long story short, my wife looked at him, looked at me, and said, "What's going on?" So I had to finally tell her, and I was hoping that none of this would follow me any further than age 17, but it did. And sometimes we find these events follow family lineages as well. Not everyone in the family, but if you've had a contact or UFO event and you go back and talk to your grandmother, grandfather, aunts, uncles, someone privately, you'll be real surprised to hear what they have to say. It's important to tell your audience that implants are extremely rare, and we've conducted 25 surgical interventions as far as India and the United States looking for these objects. Not all of them are implants. Some of them obviously are, and are extraterrestrial in origin, that sort of thing. But the important thing for me was at age 12, I had a contact experience where, again, where I did not plan on it, wasn't expecting anything like it. Some of these events happened white places, like while I'm hunting in the desert in New Mexico. Other events would happen like you literally just almost like switched on in the middle of the night, and you're wide awake, you're not dreaming, you're not sleepwalking, you're like, why am I wide awake? You know, none of it made any sense to me. So at age 12, I had an experience where I was taken inside a craft, and a long needle-like device, approximately 8 inches long, was inserted in my nasal passage, and it had a little silver sphere on the end of it. And when the entity pulled the sphere back out, it broke the bones in my nose as it went back behind my eye. And I, like anybody with rational being, you know, how could this be possible? I mean, so I started looking for other people. And years later, I found a man who said in 1960, the same time you had your event, I had the same thing done to me. Well, if you don't mind me saying so, I think you're probably making it up. You heard my story, you just duplicated it. He sent me his x-rays of a silver sphere back behind, in the nasal passage back behind the eye, next to the brain. And his doctors to this day have no idea how that thing got there. He wasn't in war. It's not a spatter effect from some kind of explosion. And they can't figure out how it got there without any damage. And to me, this was significant because it's the same year that my event happened, and it's in the exact same location. So this was some reasonable confirmation for me on a medical level. Now, we have had a case where a little girl in the middle part of the United States had 4 little gold spheres about the size of a pinhead inserted in her nasal passage. And her mother, of course, told me, my daughter wouldn't lie to anybody. And I said, well, okay, fine. But I said, I still have to have all this examined. So the mother lost the first 4. They're so small, she dropped them in the carpet and lost them. And the entity came back a few weeks later and put 4 more in, and I got those. Those were studied at York University in Toronto under the care of Dr. Nick Balakis, a tenured professor there in physics. And he handed them off to a metallurgist who studied them. And of course, at first he said, well, of course, you realize, you know, if I can manufacture this, and I don't think it's alien. I said, I don't know what it is. I'm not saying what it is. I don't know. I'm just relaying the story. Tell me what it is. And he said, well, we found out it's 51% silver and they're 49% gold. And he said they look like little tiny moons, like little tiny craters all over them. And then he is really interesting. Now here's a tenured professor, a skeptic, on the phone privately, and he says, what do you think these things are? What do you think they use them for? Now that was most amusing to me to hear Mr. Skeptic come off with stuff like this. He said, I can't manufacture them. I cannot replicate this at all. And he said, and I can't figure out why.
What do you think they are? Do you have any theories?
Well, he asked that question. I said, I would be surmising. I don't know. I said, I wished I knew everything, but I just don't. So I said, my best guess with this background is that the nasal implants, those specific ones for the little girl, probably because they're cratered like little moons. I said, imagine a liquid product that they were dipped in as an example. The deeper the dip in the object, I said, the longer it would take for the chemical to absorb basically through the nasal passage. And I said, all of that is pretty significant to me. And we're doing some research in that area. I mean, we're doing the right thing. All of it's done properly in procedures and that sort of thing. But I also want to take a lot of these objects we've got and other things, and we're going to test them in a university situation whereby we can basically ping them, so to speak, and see if there's any possibility that any of these might have a signature or something that they might resonate or something. I don't know. I have no idea. You just test things. And the second test that we're going to run is one that is absolutely phenomenal, because we've got some specialized equipment that can, to tell your audience this, they probably won't even believe it. I had to see it in operation before I even thought it worked. But one of my scientist buddies pointed his specialized equipment at a airplane that was 35,000 feet up. And he said, that's an airplane. I said, let me be a skeptic here. How do I know that? He said, well, it's 35,000 feet. Normally that's the normal flight pattern. So on. I said, I agree. Prove it. He said, then he turned his equipment on, and he said he took the light emanating off of the object, the lights flashing and this sort of thing. And he also took a recording of the sound. I said, how can you do that? This is incredible, incredible technology this guy has got. And he's going to be doing some of the work with me further with not only the implants, but I've got 3 pieces of materials that were expelled by UFOs, and 2 of them have already been studied in universities and in tenured studies and peer-reviewed studies as well, I should say. And I've got a 3rd one that still has to be studied. But anyway, some of these things we would like to see studied with this type of equipment. It's really going to be fascinating.
What do you think we're dealing with? Are they, for example, in your instance, are they the greys in the classic sense, or is that a misconception of what these beings are?
Well, in my opinion, I think if we take the which is they're this or whatever, and the gray is probably an okay illustration, but the fact is the entity that came in my room was pure white. And he had perfectly round black eyes. They were 1.5 inches. They were perfectly round. And people say, well, they have elliptical eyes now. What does that mean? I said, well, you have to understand that's just an eye covering. I said, if you study this as long as I have, you learn a lot of things. One of them, that's an eye covering, and it probably allows him to see in the infrared, ultraviolet, visible, and X-ray all at the same time. And I said, if you think that's too sci-fi, you need to start studying some of the surgical work some of these doctors are doing with high-tech equipment, where they can actually, projecting and making glasses now so that they can literally see with like X-ray into a person. So there are all kinds of ways to think of the alien as a gray. They generally are grayish or gray-brown color, light brown. But it depends on the model, and there's not a lot of talk done, but not a lot of real research done on the entities themselves. And to underscore that, we may have a biological sample. A lady scratched one of the entities during her supposed event, and we're going to test the so-called skin sample, whatever that is, and see if we can find out what it is. And it is past the muster, so to speak, in our preliminary testing. Of course, our job is to, if we can disprove it, why in the world would we waste any money proving it? So far, we've not been able to disprove it.
There are billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone with very similar properties to our Sun. The scientific probability that many of these stars are surrounded by planets with properties and environments much like that on Earth is incredibly high. Research released in 2016 placed the number of galaxies in the observable universe at 2 trillion, and the number of stars at 1 septillion. That's a 1 and 24 zeros. With those staggering numbers, it's almost a scientific certainty that the right environment to support life, certainly as we know it, must exist somewhere in the galaxy and certainly in the universe beyond. So why do we not have evidence of their existence when we're nearly certain they exist? That question is now known as the Fermi paradox, named after Italian-American physicist Enrico Fermi. Whilst there are various hypotheses to answer this conundrum, a leading one in the field of ufology, put forward by Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek amongst others, is known as the interdimensional hypothesis, or IDH. It states that visits from UFOs or their pilots are not indeed visits from other worlds far off in space, but rather from other realities or dimensions, which exist here alongside our own. Though it is worth noting that the idea of IDH does not need to be mutually exclusive from that of interstellar travel, so we may well have a situation whereby we're dealing with both in tandem. Though some prominent ufologists, such as Brad Steiger and John Ankerberg, have abandoned the idea of interstellar travel and extraterrestrial visitors altogether, it is of course difficult for us here on Earth, even with our current understanding of advanced physics, to grasp how one may support flight of a craft of any sort between star systems or even planets within our own solar system without anti-gravitational or superluminal technology. Such technological advances would not, of course, be necessary should the craft be travelling between dimensions here on Earth, or at least the space that surrounds it. So are these visitors of which mankind has spoken for all time, travellers from the darkened corners of the universe, technologically proficient masters of space-time? Or are they already here, existing beyond the veil, phasing in and out to achieve their own, sometimes rather nefarious, agendas?
Well, I have a TV show that we're working on that will answer some of those questions. I'll be put on the spot specifically for that point. And there are different levels of consciousness, and some of these entities appear to be extraterrestrial, so to speak. Most of the ones that we're looking at that we've found actual evidence of are in this solar system. Are they from like another universe or another layer or this sort of thing? That is entirely possible, but I would suspect that that's the ones who made, hatched or cloned or manufactured these particular ones that people are referring to as the alien. I suspect that the ones who made, hatched, cloned, or made or manufactured these entities are the ones that have the capability to come from another dimension. And in fact, they probably do.
Is there any evidence that they are based here? Maybe not on a permanent basis, but that they have some sort of, rest stop or facility here that they can, dock craft or whatever, be that underground or underwater, for instance?
Well, I'd give you the CIA answer, but I'd have to kill myself if I told you. Just kidding, of course. I hope. The real answer is that we have indicators, but again, no proof yet. And I don't like to throw stuff out and say we know that until we do. When we do, then we're going to tell. It's that simple. I have nothing to hide there. It is easier for me to say that from a NASA scientist's point of view, they're located in the Cassini rings of Saturn. According to, any of your people can look this up themselves. It was a wonderful book that was written called Ring Makers of Saturn. And the scientist wrote a book about the rings of Saturn, and the fact he called Makers of Saturn. And literally he claims, and there is something there, I don't know what it is, because I haven't been there. There is something there that appears to be in the Cassini area of the rings of Saturn. Now, I find that fascinating because the JPL, if you or your people are familiar with this, that's Jet Propulsion Lab, invited me to an invitation-only meeting and when they were going to launch the Cassini spacecraft. This is the first nuclear-powered spacecraft going to the Jovian system and by Saturn and that area. And the fascinating thing about that was they know who I am, they know what I do. Why in the world would you invite me to a meeting like that? I'm literally not qualified to be the janitor, and they know who I am, they know what I do. And of course they asked for questions, and I asked one, and it ended the meeting as soon as I asked the question. I didn't ask anything obtuse or ugly. I just asked them why they quit going to Mars and what did they find in the area of Saturn or Jupiter that would cause them to leave their entire project and take off with the first nuclear package toward that system. And immediately they said, "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and free drinks and gifts for everybody in the back, and enjoy yourselves. What a wonderful evening." And that was it. I mean, well, they know who I am. They know I'm going to ask. If you give me the shot, I'm going to ask the question.
And that's some validation in itself.
I just want to ask the question. So if I was crazy, why in the world would they invite somebody like me to a meeting like that with one of my doctors?
So we seem to be reaching a point where it's becoming more and more accepted that there are things in our skies that we don't understand, and it's becoming more and more accepted by governments of the world, certainly of the US most recently, that we don't always know what's flying through our airspace. You have extensive experience working for government agencies, and so you know how they operate from within. Do you feel that the recent partial disclosure with regards to, the USS Nimitz and some of the recent revelations surrounding that are due to increasing and mounting pressure from the public to concede knowledge or lack thereof of the phenomena? Or do you think it's a very deliberate, drip-fed misinformation case, which is obviously hiding something else from our view?
If you're any indication of your audience, that's a brilliant question. And I think we should all be concerned about that. To me, first of all this information, period, belongs to the people. First of all, your tax dollars paid for it. And second, and most important, if this is something that's beyond us, so to speak, Earth, we all need to know about it. So I'm not for secrecy in that sense of the word. To answer your question directly, number one, the Tic Tac information that we saw on the Nimitz and other shows, a lot of that information is 7 to 12, 14 years old. Think there's been any sightings since then? think there's been any better ones? I assure you there have been.
Sure.
Not only that, but someone told me the other day they knew that this was all disclosure. I said, you're living in a rubber world. You just stretch it wherever you want. I said, I'm telling you. They said, well, the CIA just downloaded nearly 1 million documents the other day on UFOs. And I said, listen to me carefully. Carefully. How long do you think it's going to take you to read through that 1 million pages of dribble? 20 years or 30? My point is, you're not getting the information. You're being spoon-fed exactly what you're supposed to get. I said, I'm loyal as anything you've ever seen. 100% have a top secret clearance, 100% loyal. But this stuff belongs to the public. We, as a people, not the United States, not the UK, us as people, humanity, need to make decisions on that level about who they are, what they're here for, and what needs to be done. That should be a worldwide decision, not, to use a very crude example, the movie ID4, Independence Day, showed on July 4th here for a lot of TV shows, and the Earth was attacked. Isn't it curious that the Earth was attacked and then everybody became friends, Russians, everybody. There were no enemies on planet Earth. But the fact is that something out there is bigger than, we're not telling our people what it should be. And I think that we should, I truly do.
Coming a little bit off UFOs, obviously you have decades worth of work. You've also done a very fair amount of research into how cryptids play, or some cryptids play a part in this as well. So you've looked into Bigfoot and you've looked into the Chupacabra, obviously, amongst others. What role do they have in this wider phenomenon?
Well, it gets weirder. That question just opens up a whole...
Sorry.
It's like Pandora's box you just asked me to open. And the problem is, once I open it, it never gets closed. It just opens more and more and more questions. And a lady from a TV program called me here back, about a dozen of them did, and wanted me to do. I told them I'm already under agreement to do a program, and I'm going to work with that. And she says, well, at least help me out here on the cryptid thing. And I said, all right. She says, the Chupacabra, what do you think about that? I said, I'm going to either gain the greatest respect from you or lose my entire credibility just by the answer. And she says, what do you mean? I said, well, in Texas, they called the Texas blue dog, as they call this very strange looking creature. I said, so I don't have to tell you that I think it exists. I've got one in the freezer. And it was given to me by a rancher who shot it. And I asked him, why in the world would you want to shoot this thing? He said, well, I think it's a crossbreed between a coyote and a dog or something. He said, but it's weird. I've never seen anything like it. And I said, well, you're a rancher. You know all about coyotes. I said, I've lived in New Mexico in the desert and everything else. And I'm telling you that coyotes and horses don't get along. You want to get your horse eaten? This is the way to do it. I said, this thing was living in your barn with all your horses. And the horses loved him. And I said, in fact, when I picked up the body, I've got a film of me carrying the body out in a sack. The horses come over and sniff to the little sack. I said, this doesn't make any sense. So the idea that cryptids exist, obviously, at least that one does anyway. Cryptids, in my opinion, are historical. They're not just weird and it's, whatever some weirdo wants to say on TV. The fact is, if you look in ancient books, the Bible, you'll see words like the Seder, and you'll look in the book of Jasher, you'll find cryptids listed there. Look in ancient, I've been to India and other places, you look in their archaeological finds and so on, and you'll see the drawings, carvings, and all kinds of things of these creatures. And of course, say, well, that's all made up, but that's possible. But the problem is, some of these things we're finding the bones to. I don't know how the bones became real. This was just a drawing, or it was just a carving. So I'm going to be doing an incredible DNA study on one of the cryptids. I can't tell you anything about it, only that when you see it, you'll have to believe it because it's there and it's been studied, but it's just going to blow people away. I do a presentation that's called Angels, Demons, Aliens, and Ghosts. And in each one of them, I give photography of every one of those that I have. And then I show that there are different signatures for each of these entities. And this is how you can tell the difference, because they're not the same thing. Are they connected in some way or another? I think so. I was asked by an individual when they did the DNA study on Bigfoot. They asked me if I would send some samples up there, and I called the lab and told them I had samples. They said they had plenty, and I said, well, that's fine. I said, I'm not a Bigfoot guy. I said, but that doesn't mean I never come across the evidence. I've been doing this for over 50 years. And I said, I've got not only hair samples from the 1980s, but I've got reportedly a fingernail sample and a urine sample. And I said, so evidence is everything to me. I don't care what people say. That's just a story to me. My information, it's just a story until I have the evidence. So ultimately, to me, if you're going to tell these stories, that's fine. But at some point, you're going to have to belly up to the bar and you're going to have to show me the evidence. You're going to have to have this stuff looked at by people in a forensic setting where that public forum can be reviewed, studied, peer reviewed, that sort of thing. We had a police officer right down here in Conroe, Texas, just about 40 miles down the road from me. And they took him a Bigfoot, a lot of Bigfoot stuff. Now, you got to understand, he didn't believe in all this stuff. He didn't care. He didn't like it. He didn't like nothing. But he's an expert in primate prints. He's one of the world's best. And they showed him different things. He went through them, just this is fake, that's this, that. He went through everything. That's actually an ape. This is actually a chimpanzee. I mean, he can go through them so fast, make your head spin. That is a simian creature. And he said, and he gave, how big it was, the weight and everything, and why it was real. And he said, I don't know what the thing is. He said, but it's not an ape. It's huge. And he said, it's a simian creature. He said, but it's nothing I've ever seen. And the thing is, it's huge. And he said, like I said, he didn't believe in all that, don't want to see any of it, he didn't want to analyze it, but he himself validated the Bigfoot, quote unquote, that particular print as valid. And I just think there's probably other people out there that are sitting on some really good evidence. But until somebody like me comes along that is credible and that will listen to your story 100%, but then wants you to show the evidence, and let's look at it. I want to know how you got it. I want to where it came from. I want to know everything. That has to be done, and it has to be peer reviewed. It just does.
Sure. And of course, there's a staggeringly increasing amount of reports of the link between Bigfoot and UFO sightings, where experiences will witness one then the other, or will be following a Bigfoot and catch a UFO, or vice versa, where they may be having an extended amount of UFO experience, and then the Bigfoot joins in, and I guess 10, certainly 20, but probably only 10 years ago, I don't think there was much correlation between, maybe not for you, but there wasn't too much correlation between those two things. They were seen as two very, very different beliefs, two very, very different phenomena, two very, very different things. Bigfoot is something terrestrial and unknown, a crypt, and now actually there's just an amazing amount of evidence to the contrary.
The fact is that in 1992, we had a mass abduction of 8 people in 2 states and several cities. 8 of our people were taken, including an engineer, my senior investigator. They were taken by a small craft to a very large craft. And when I found out about this, I was startled, of course. And the engineer, he told me the story, and he said we were taken to a craft that was huge. And I said, what do you mean huge? And he said it was the small craft were all taken to this massive one. He said it was approximately 50 miles thick, 600 miles across. And I said, he said, looks like you're having a problem with that. And I said, a little bit. And he said, I thought you'd say that, so I brought the video. I said, what video? He said an astronomer was taking a video of the moon on that night during the time of the mass abduction, during that time period. He found a massive craft in the proximity of the moon. He said, I think that's the craft. It's the same exact time, and that was the location where we think we were taken. So if that's true, we may have the film of it, but here's the fascinating part. There were a lineage, a group of these entities, I call them the seven flavors, or the seven models, the aliens, so-called alien. Everybody says, well, there's a praying mantis, there's grays, there's this reptile guy, and there's this and that and everything. I said, yeah, and then there's a Bigfoot next to him, because all of them were lined up in a row. And they were all there on the craft, and everybody saw him at the same time. So he's part and parcel, in my opinion, to this menagerie of entities. It's going to take all of us to study the phenomena. The reason science is not the answer, or the medical is not the answer, or the psychology is not the answer, is because it's not a science problem. It's not a medical problem. It's bigger than that. It's a consciousness problem. And it's something that we're ultimately going to have to deal with as a race. And a lot of us are going to get caught up in this thing, I think, at the end of the story, so to speak. I would prefer that we were all on the front end of it.
So your book is out. Obviously, it's been out, a little while now. Alien Hunter: Evidence in Light, it is called. It can be found on Amazon and many other stockists. What's next, Derrel? Where can people find you? What's coming up in the future for you?
They can find me on alienhunter.org if they want to email me, and I answer all my emails. If I don't answer, it's because I'm either traveling, and since it's due to the virus right now, I'm probably not traveling a lot. But the fact is that I can be reached there, and if I didn't answer you, send it again, because I didn't get it. But I'm not rude. I answer every question, even from snarky people, from nice people, scientists, intelligence people, all kinds of people write me. I mean, all kinds.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. We're looking forward to following where you're going, to the new show coming up, and to seeing where your research takes you next.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
I could talk all night. We're 5 to 10 in the evening here, and I have 2 little boys, so I have to try and turn myself back into a dad now. And
well, you're a gentleman and a scholar and a fine dad. So thank you, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Peer Beyond the Veil has been written and presented by myself, Mark Watson. Music and soundtracks are credited and licensed to Purple Planet and to Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons. All rights are reserved by our parent company, MLW Publishing. You can follow us at facebook.com/Peer Beyond the Veil, or on Twitter at Peer Beyond the Veil, or at Peer Beyond 2020. Please click the like and subscribe buttons when you see them, most importantly wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps us to attract the attention we need to keep the show going, to get the guests that you all want to hear from, and to help more and more people peer beyond the veil.